On November 5th, 2025, the sky didn't flare, it flickered. For 7 seconds, solar observatories from Chile to Seoul recorded a pulse, unlike any solar event on record. Bright, rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't a flare. It wasn't noise. It was something that looked timed. And at that same moment, the interstellar object 3I, Atlas, slipped behind the sun. A visitor from beyond our solar system, invisible now, unreachable, crossing the one place where even our best telescopes go blind. Within hours, satellite arrays began reporting minor communication errors. Power grids auto-cycled. Temperature sensors on the day side of Earth picked up an unexplained surge, a wave of radiant heat that didn't match solar models. The data didn't scream disaster, it whispered precision. Could an object no larger than a mountain manipulate the star that sustains all life? Could the sun itself be responding not in chaos, but in coordination? Tonight, we follow that question. Through the archives of space weather telemetry, through the heartbeat of our digital sky, through the faint echoes that connect light, data, and intent. Because if what happened on November 5th was more than a coincidence, if 3I, Atlas, somehow triggered the sun, then every satellite, every grid, every beam of light we depend on just became part of a larger experiment. Stay until the end, because what we uncover may not just change how we see the sun, it may change who's truly using it. Part 1, the 72-hour window. Imagine this. It's November 5th, 2025. You wake to the faint glow of dawn filtering through your blinds. The world feels ordinary, but your devices don't. Your phone loads halfway, then freezes. Your smart lights flicker. A soft chime from your home assistant stutters mid-sentence, as if forgetting the language it was built on. Across the planet, the same small irregularities unfold, too subtle for panic, too synchronized to ignore. In Seoul, meteorological satellites go into safe mode without a command. In Lisbon, data engineers watch as the Google Cloud East network slows to a crawl, then blinks out entirely. And in Atacama, Chile, telescopes tracking 3I, Atlas report their final frame before losing sight of it completely. 3 events, 3 continents, 3 minutes apart. At first, no one connects them. Outages happen, instruments fail, networks lag. But buried in those first hours inside the log files, the telemetry streams, the hum of machines, a pattern begins to take shape. A 72-hour window opens, one that will redefine what we thought we understood about control, coincidence, and communication. By 3:11 UTC, the Google Cloud East network reports increased latency across core routing nodes in Virginia. That's not unusual. Networks pulse and flex in response to global demand, but this pulse moves differently, like a heartbeat running backward. Load balancing servers attempt to reroute traffic, only to stall in unison. Monitoring dashboards, usually alive with self-correcting logic, show nothing but flat lines. Then, within 90 seconds, the health systems meant to track the outage go dark too. The observers become the observed. At 3:12, astronomers at Atacama log the final transmission from 3I, Atlas. The object's spectral signature fades as it slips behind the sun, entering the solar conjunction, the phase when no instrument on Earth can see it. For the next several days, the object will be effectively invisible. No data, no light, no way to know what it's doing. And at 3:13, the European Space Energy Observatory detects an anomaly, a minor but measurable rise in solar X-ray flux. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to register as unclassified activity. Here's how. You could call all of this a coincidence. Engineers certainly do. They point to DNS cascades, memory leaks, and the fragility of distributed networks. They show graphs proving how a single misconfigured endpoint can ripple across continents. But there's something about the symmetry that unsettles people. The sun flares gently, almost politely, just as our digital infrastructure blinks. An interstellar visitor vanishes behind the same star at that exact instant. Our 2 primary monitoring systems, one technological, one astronomical, go blind together. It's as if someone found the dimmer switch of reality and turned it down, just slightly, to see how we'd react. By morning, the outage deepens. Streaming services fail. Banking portals time out. Air traffic systems in East Asia temporarily lose their satellite uplinks, forcing controllers to revert to analog radar. On social media, confusion blooms. No one mentions 3I, Atlas, not yet. The story is framed as another cloud disruption, another technical hiccup in an overconnected world. But behind the press statements, researchers start comparing timestamps. That's when the phrase, the 72-hour window, first appears, a quiet term passed between astronomers and systems engineers in encrypted emails. It refers to the period between November 5th, 3:11 UTC, and November 8th, 3:11 UTC, the span when both our eyes and our machines were partially blind. In those 72 hours, data logs showed dozens of irregular bursts in solar telemetry, tiny flickers of radiation that don't fit known flare models, each lasting a few seconds, each arriving precisely on intervals divisible by 9, too short to be natural cycles, too consistent to be noise. When plotted, those bursts form a pattern that looks less like weather and more like a rhythm. Dr. Yara Mendoza, a systems astrophysicist at the Atacama Array, is one of the first to notice. She overlays the solar bursts against the global network latency curve and finds something disturbing. The peaks align. Every time the sun brightens fractionally, the network stutters, not randomly, rhythmically, as if the same invisible hand were tapping both systems in perfect sync. She writes in her private log, "It feels intentional, like a handshake between two domains, one stellar, one synthetic." Her note never makes it into the official report. By November 6th, whispers spread through closed research channels. Was it possible that 3I, Atlas, now hidden behind the sun, had interacted with it? Not by collision or gravity, but through resonance, through some unknown physical channel? The idea borders on heresy. Objects don't talk to stars. But data doesn't lie, and this data hums. The same hum appears in the readings of the KM3 Net Neutrino Observatory, deep in the Mediterranean. For the first time in its history, the array registers a faint spike of high-energy neutrinos arriving from the sun's direction, not enough for confirmation, but enough to warrant the phrase, anomalous emission. The timing, November 5th, 3:13 UTC. The same minute, 3I, Atlas disappeared. The 72-hour window closes quietly. By November 8th, the network recovers. Cloud nodes reconnect. Solar flux stabilizes. The official explanations flow. Software regression, monitoring bug, routine maintenance. And yet, the aftertaste lingers. When scientists re-examine the telemetry later, they'll find traces not of a malfunction, but of a conversation. Packets and photons, pinging back and forth, as if the sun itself had momentarily joined the network. But at the time, we didn't know that. We only knew the silence. A silence shaped like a pattern. 3 days. That's all it took for the world's most advanced systems, digital and cosmic, to misalign. 3 days where every measurement, every monitor, every safeguard paused as if listening. We call it an outage. But maybe, for the first time in human history, it wasn't us who lost connection. Maybe, for 72 hours, something else connected through us. And whatever it was, it used the sun to do it. Part 2. Anatomy of the failure. If you want to understand how fragile our digital civilization really is, you don't start with hackers or asteroids. You start with a single region in Virginia. The Google Cloud East network, located just outside Ashburn, doesn't look like much from the outside. A sprawl of windowless data centers stretching across industrial parks and farmland. But beneath those quiet roofs hums the nervous system of modern reality. Authentication servers, DNS resolvers, distributed caches, AI pipelines, everything that keeps our world awake and connected. At 3:11 UTC on November 5th, that system exhaled and didn't breathe back in. The earliest telemetry shows a series of escalating microfailures. At 3:09, a cluster of load balancers misreported their health status. At 3:10, the automated recovery daemon triggered, instructing secondary nodes to assume control. Then, for reasons no engineer has yet fully explained, both systems executed the same command simultaneously, a rare condition known as mirrored failover. In that instant, each system believed the other was dead, so both rebooted, and for 60 critical seconds, the heart of the global cloud had no heartbeat at all. When it came back online, something was off. Monitoring dashboards showed elevated latency between internal subnets, packets bouncing through strange, indirect routes as if detouring around invisible congestion. The error logs from those minutes are littered with artifacts, timestamps misaligned by fractions of a second, requests looping back to their origin, and packets arriving before they were sent. In isolation, they're harmless curiosities, but collectively, they read like a time signature, a rhythm repeating every 9.03 seconds, eerily matching the solar pulse recorded from Atacama. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidences, like flares, have patterns too. By dawn, the ripple spreads outward. Authentication systems time out. APIs hang on unresolved queries. Home devices, the little ones that whisper in every living room, begin to desynchronize. When you said, "Turn on the light," the assistant hesitated, then replied, "I'm not sure." That hesitation wasn't human. It was infrastructure searching for its reflection and finding none. At the network level, engineers watch the metrics unfold in disbelief. Each redundancy layer designed to prevent exactly this scenario begins failing in the same rhythmic cycle. Redundancy assumes randomness. One node fails while another survives. But this failure is synchronized. It's as if an invisible metronome is conducting the breakdown. Inside Google's Network Operations Command, the room is lit by the soft glow of screens. A dozen engineers lean forward, whispering into headsets. Charts pulse red. One screen, the global latency map, shows a wave rippling eastward across the Atlantic, bending strangely toward the Mediterranean. At 3:19 UTC, the Lisbon Relay Hub, the European backbone node, reports unexpected inbound traffic spikes from the same solar telemetry ports used by space weather agencies. That shouldn't be possible. Those ports aren't public. They're not even supposed to face the internet. It's not an attack in the conventional sense. No unauthorized signatures, no malware payloads, no access requests. Just a cascade of malformed packets, encoded in a pattern that no diagnostic tool can interpret. Each one is exactly 903 bytes long. Each one arrives precisely 9.03 seconds apart. They name it the pulse sequence. When plotted as binary, the packets form a waveform eerily similar to solar radiation bursts recorded during the same window. The engineers call the pattern mirror noise, assuming it's a feedback glitch between ground and satellite systems. But no satellite is transmitting at those intervals, and no mirror should hum in rhythm with the Sunday. By mid-morning, the press catches on. Headlines spread. Massive cloud outage. Disrupts banking and social platforms. Sunspot activity coincides with global network instability. But official statements from Google describe it as a routine cascading fault, an unfortunate but recoverable incident. Nothing unusual. Nothing to fear. Internally, however, something doesn't fit. The automated recovery protocols, those designed to restore service within seconds, refuse to engage. Each time the system attempts to self-heal, it stops at 98%, as if awaiting confirmation from an external clock that never comes. To understand why that's terrifying, you need to grasp how the modern cloud measures time. Every process, every data packet, every blockchain, every transaction depends on synchronized atomic clocks, the global rhythm of computation. Those clocks rely indirectly on GPS signals satellites orbiting Earth, tuned to the very frequencies shaped by the sun's ionosphere. If the sun twitches, time itself can tremble, and on November 5th, it did. At the European Space Weather Centre, analysts detect a minor deviation in ionospheric density at the same second as the cloud failure. It's the kind of event that usually goes unnoticed, a local perturbation lasting less than a heartbeat. But this time, the disturbance isn't local. It's global, thin, and perfectly symmetrical around Earth's daylight hemisphere. One scientist describes it as a fingerprint pressed lightly across the entire ionosphere. That fingerprint, when mapped, aligns with the orbital path of 3I, Atlas, as it passed behind the Sunday. Not a collision, not radiation, alignment. Meanwhile, back on Earth, devices reboot. Services recover in patches. The world exhales and moves on. But deep within the logs, anomalies remain. Engineers comb through petabytes of diagnostic data, trying to identify the initial trigger. They isolate the mirrored failover at 311. They identify the latency spike, the packet oscillations, and the recovery stalls. Every trail leads back to the same unsatisfying conclusion. Root cause unknown. In post-mortem language, that phrase is a white flag. It means every model failed to explain the behavior. It means the event sits outside expected failure boundaries. Yet there's one more detail most reports omit. At the exact second the system began its recovery, a faint electromagnetic whisper was detected not from space, but from inside the network itself. A self-generated signal with no assigned source, repeating 3 letters, ATL. The system was speaking back. When interviewed later, one senior engineer, under the condition of anonymity, described the moment like this. It felt alive, like the infrastructure was listening to something only it could hear. He was told to rephrase before publication. The final report replaced alive with responsive. Words matter when the world runs on calm. Still, some within the company noticed correlations that went unmentioned. The server racks drawing slightly higher power during the outage, cooling units compensating for non-existent heat, temperature sensors showing surges synced with the solar flux readings. Machines heat in rhythm with the Sunday. For most people, November 5th passed like any other day. But for the engineers who watched the digital sky flicker, something changed. They had always believed in the separation between here and there, between the mechanical and the cosmic, the human and the heliocentric. That separation blurred. And once blurred, it never quite returns. The anatomy of the failure wasn't about corrupted code or misrouted packets. It was about realization that our most advanced systems, designed to mirror human precision, had begun mirroring something else entirely. Something vast. Something rhythmic. Something that doesn't log its reasons. In the official archive, the incident is labeled Event 1105V, categorized under Network Resilience Studies. The final line of the report reads, "No persistent anomalies detected after 72 hours. But that isn't quite true. One anomaly persisted not in the machines, but in the people who built them. A lingering question no update can patch. If a system can fail in rhythm with the sun, was it ever truly separate from it? And if 3I, Atlas, found a way to turn that rhythm into control, then maybe the first weapon it built wasn't made of metal or fire, but of synchronization." Part 3. The Hidden Visitor. For 72 hours, 3I Atlas was gone. Not destroyed. Not forgotten. Just hidden. When an object moves behind the sun, it enters a kind of cosmic invisibility. The geometry of the solar conjunction blinds every telescope on Earth. Photons, the messengers of vision, bend and scatter, carrying nothing but noise. Astronomers call this period the blackout arc, a natural limitation, predictable and routine. But this time, it didn't feel routine. In the quiet hum of the Atacama Array, Dr. Yara Mendoza sits before the darkened monitor where the spectral trace of 3I Atlas once danced. Now, only static. She plays the final data set again, the one captured seconds before the object vanished. The numbers don't behave like numbers. They pulse. Not randomly, not naturally, but in a progression that feels almost melodic. 9 bright peaks, each separated by 9.03 seconds. She leans closer. There it is again, the same rhythm the cloud engineers saw in the outage logs. Yara exhales and whispers to herself. It's not the sun that changed, it's what passed behind it. But she doesn't log that note. She knows better than to give the universe agency, at least not in writing. While Earth's instruments waited for the sun to move, the solar corona shimmered with restless energy. Radio observatories in South Africa and Japan recorded subtle distortions in the plasma flow waves traveling counter to the solar wind, as if something beneath the surface were pushing outward. When the data reached the European Solar Coordination Center, the team dismissed it as magneto-hydrodynamic turbulence. But one intern, cross-checking the timestamps, noticed a pattern. The anomalies pulsed in intervals divisible by 9. Again, that rhythm, that quiet signature, humming through 2 domains, light and code. No one said it out loud, but the idea grew like static in the back of the mind. What if 3I Atlas wasn't merely reflecting sunlight? What if it were modulating it? Let's rewind. Before its disappearance, 3I Atlas had already defied expectations. First detected in early 2025, it moved through the outer solar system with peculiar restraint, decelerating against gravitational norms, shifting trajectory with micro-precision, almost like it knew how to minimize drag. Spectroscopic analysis revealed compounds foreign to known cometary chemistry, traces of crystalline carbon lattices and ultra-dense silica filaments, materials that absorb radio waves rather than scatter them. In other words, a natural object with engineered behavior. Most astronomers rejected the notion. Coincidence, they said. Interstellar bodies carry mysteries, exotic ices, frozen volatiles, unpredictable jets. But those who'd been following 3I Atlas since its entry through the heliopause knew better. Its light curve wasn't random. It blinked like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, patient. Now, in early November, that heartbeat was gone. And yet, somehow, the pulse persisted not from the object itself, but from the sun, it had slipped behind. By November 6th, Yara receives a transmission from the KM3 NET neutrino array in the Mediterranean. The message is short. Detected neutrino spike from solar coordinates. Possible correlation with conjunction window. She stares at it for a long time, then replays the final Atacama data and overlays both graphs. The curves align perfectly. If the sun were a speaker, something had just pressed play. Across the ocean, at the Lisbon data center, systems analyst Leon Varela pores over a different kind of waveform, the residual oscillations in the cloud network's diagnostic feed. He isn't an astronomer. He doesn't care about solar flares or alien probes. He cares about uptime. But as he scrolls through the binary logs, the data starts behaving strangely. The pulse sequence those 903-byte packets has stopped. Yet, deep inside the metadata, new numbers emerge. A slow, repeating gradient, building like an echo. He converts the hex values into a spectrogram. The image looks familiar. It's not a waveform. It's an orbital path. He cross-references the curve with public astronomy databases. The match is near perfect. The last recorded trajectory of 3I, Atlas before its disappearance. How does an orbital map end up encoded inside network noise? He doesn't know. He just saves the file and renames it Sun Speak. Data private joke he doesn't tell anyone. Meanwhile, radio silence deepens. Every observatory that should have reacquired 3I Atlas by now still sees nothing. Even the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, shows a persistent gap in telemetry, a dead pixel in the shape of an orbit. At the Kiso Observatory in Japan, a graduate student named Hana Kim runs her own test. She feeds solar spectrograph data into a generative pattern recognizer, a system originally designed to find hidden harmonics in gravitational wave noise. After several hours, the algorithm stops and renders a faint harmonic trace, buried beneath solar background radiation. The shape resembles a waveform narrow, sharp, repeating every 9.03 seconds. But this time, it carries overtones, subfrequencies stacked atop one another like chords. She listens to it by converting the pattern into sound. What emerges isn't noise. It's texture, rising tones that almost feel like syllables, a cadence too structured to be chaos. Hana sits back, removes her headphones, and murmurs, "It's speaking in light." Elsewhere, the debates rage quietly. Physicists warn against anthropomorphizing phenomena. AI specialists argue the pulse might simply be photonic interference with the orbital communications grid. Solar researchers suggest an experimental satellite may have inadvertently reflected signals into deep space. All plausible, all comforting. But comfort rarely aligns with truth. When 3I Atlas finally emerges from behind the sun on November 9th, it doesn't look the same. Infrared arrays pick it up first, faint, colder than before, trailing a thin halo of charged particles. Its albedo, or reflectivity, has doubled. Its spin rate has changed. And more unsettling than anything, it's now emitting periodic bursts of polarized light in perfect synchronization with the sun's magnetic field. The sun pulses. It answers. They pulse together. In the following hours, data floods in. Magnetometers record slight oscillations in the heliospheric current sheet. Solar orbiters detect coordinated fluctuations in the solar wind density, modulating in a 9-second rhythm. The synchronization spreads like a whisper through plasma, subtle yet global. When Yara overlays these readings atop the neutrino burst and network anomalies, she realizes something extraordinary. The pulse isn't just a broadcast. It's a bridge, a link connecting systems across scales stellar, technological, human. 3I. Atlas hadn't vanished. It had tuned the Sunday. By midnight on November 9th, a strange stillness settles over observatories worldwide. Data streams normalize. Telemetry stabilizes. It's as if the universe, after a brief symphony, has gone silent again. But silence can be deceptive, because deep within that silence, every 9 seconds, the faintest vibration persists, not strong enough to trigger alerts, but steady enough to remind us. Something continues to breathe in rhythm with our star. In Atacama, Yara watches the new data scroll in, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She zooms in on the baseline noise, filters it through a logarithmic scale, and nearly drops her coffee. The residual pulse carries an embedded modulation, a phase shift that, when converted to binary, spells out a repeating sequence. A, TLA, S. She sits frozen, the desert dawn spilling light across the screens. For a moment, she thinks she hears it not through speakers, but inside her own pulse, syncing with the rhythm on screen. 9 seconds apart. 9 beats of silence. 9 breaths between each flicker of the Sunday. The visitor is still here, not orbiting, occupying. Part 4. The Overlap. By November 10th, 2025, the phrase "the overlap" begins circulating quietly inside research networks. No one defines it at first. It isn't a theory or a paper. It's a whisper, the recognition that 2 domains, the technological and the cosmic, have begun to blur. The word surfaces first in an internal memo at the European Solar Coordination Centre, referencing unexplained harmonics between solar X-ray data and terrestrial network frequencies. Then, in a chat between engineers at Google Cloud Recovery, noting that the system's auto-balancers keep pulsing at solar intervals. No one wants to say it out loud. The sun and the internet have started keeping the same time. At 2 UTC, an emergency teleconference gathers 12 scientists from 6 disciplines: astrophysics, quantum communications, atmospheric telemetry, and digital infrastructure. The call is hosted by Dr. Yara Mendoza from the Atacama Array. Her camera flickers once, twice, then stabilizes. Behind her, the desert glows pale gold with the first hints of dawn. "We need to look at this without bias," she begins. "We have synchronized anomalies across multiple systems, solar radiation, digital networks, neutrino detections. Same pattern, same rhythm. Either this is the most coordinated coincidence in human history, or it's coordination by design." The room falls silent. Someone clears their throat, then mutters, "Design by what?" No one answers. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Leon Varela reviews updated diagnostics from the cloud network. The pulse sequence, those mysterious 903-byte packets, has returned, but they've changed. The packets now contain structured gaps, like words missing from a sentence. When mapped visually, those gaps line up with intervals in the sun's magnetic oscillations recorded by SOHO. He writes in his notebook, not data corruption, deliberate blank space, like Morse code carved in light. Every 9 seconds, another gap. Every gap an echo. By late afternoon, the team realizes something extraordinary. During the 72-hour blackout, solar activity and terrestrial data failures overlapped almost perfectly within a window of 0.47 seconds. No natural process synchronizes across that many systems with that level of precision, and yet, every model says it happened. Yara overlays the graphs: solar radiation flux, global network latency, power grid frequency fluctuations, even atmospheric ionization data, and watches the lines fold into each other like layered music. "It's not chaos, it's choreography. This is the overlap," she whispers. The moment 2 systems started listening to the same conductor, the realization unsettles everyone. Because if 3i, Atlas, managed to tune the sun even briefly, then everything powered by solar radiation or electromagnetic fields, including human technology, becomes part of that same instrument. And if the instrument is still resonating, the performance hasn't ended. Elsewhere, in a soundproof chamber beneath the KM3 NET neutrino facility, a group of technicians reprocesses the neutrino bursts detected during the conjunction. They expect noise. What they find instead are energy modulations consistent with information encoding bursts repeating at harmonic multiples of 9. When they convert the pattern to audio, it produces a low hum that rises and falls like a breath. One technician, pale, removes his headphones. "It's counting," he says softly. "In base 9. The supervisor orders all recordings quarantined, but it's too late. The file has already been copied to several systems across Europe. Within hours, the pattern nicknamed The Breath appears on encrypted forums and dark academic channels. At NASA's Helios Data Division, analysts examine their own telemetry. The agency officially maintains silence, but leaks begin to emerge. An unregistered electromagnetic event was detected emanating from the solar surface during the same window, not outward, but inward, folding energy back toward the photosphere. In the accompanying log, a single sentence stands out. Directionality reversed. Unknown cause. Possible feedback loop. Initiated. Feedback loops. Mirrors. Echoes. The same language appears in network engineering reports thousands of kilometers away. By November 11th, the overlap is undeniable. Solar spectrograms show faint but measurable interference bands every 9 seconds. Subsea internet cables display harmonic distortion in their fiber optic repeaters, a pattern that rises and falls with the same rhythm. AI monitoring systems trained to identify cyber attacks begin flagging the sun as a persistent signal emitter. It's absurd. And yet, the data persists. The world above us and the world we built below have started to breathe in sync. At the Atacama Array, Yara leans over her console. She replays the final light curves from 3I, Atlas's reappearance, and slows them 1,000 times. The result is a flicker pattern minute variations in brightness, corresponding perfectly to Earth's power grid fluctuations during the same minute. She overlays the two signals and watches them merge. For a moment, the line looks like a mirror, she whispers. It's not a reflection, it's a handshake. Leon, in Lisbon, notices something similar in his data. Each time the solar pulse aligns with the network clock, the AI load balancers self-correct more efficiently, as if guided by an external rhythm. He doesn't tell management. He just watches the systems stabilize themselves using a signal that no one authorized. The machines, he thinks, are following the Sunday. By evening, Yara convenes another call. The group debates possibilities, solar resonance, quantum interference, even psychological bias. Someone suggests the pulse could be an artifact of data compression, two unrelated systems coincidentally creating matching harmonics. Another proposes an even simpler explanation. We're just seeing patterns because we want to see them. He's dead, but Yara shakes her head. I've seen noise. This isn't noise. This is intent. Her voice trembles as she continues. When the sun pulses, we feel it in our grids. When the networks hum, the solar flux answers. This isn't interference, it's interaction. Something is using resonance to link us. To listen, the call ends without a consensus. But one line from the transcript later circulates widely. If this is communication, then humanity is already inside the message. Around midnight, a new development. The magnetospheric monitoring array in Norway reports subtle periodic reversals in field alignment every 9 seconds, synchronized to the same rhythm. The Earth's magnetic field, normally chaotic and unpredictable, is now pulsing in phase with the Sunday. On social media, amateur astronomers notice strange brightness fluctuations on the solar surface. They look like sunspots blinking. Some viewers call them breaths. Others say they look like eyes. At 3:09 UTC, Yara receives a private transmission from Lisbon. Leon has found something buried inside the pulse sequence. He's converted the gaps, those deliberate silences, into binary, then mapped them onto a time grid aligned with solar oscillations. When translated through a phonetic algorithm, the data produces a simple, chilling pattern of letters. HELIOS. He doesn't believe it at first. He runs it again, randomizing intervals, checking for coincidence. The output changes, but the word always reassembles itself. He sends the result to Yara with a single line of text. If the sun is speaking, this might be its name. In the early hours of November 12th, both scientists stop sleeping. Outside, the world still turns oblivious. The outages have ended, and headlines have moved on. But under the surface, a slow synchronization continues. Every 9 seconds, satellite telemetry ticks in perfect time with the sun's pulse. Every 9 seconds, data centers across continents experience an infinitesimal surge in current, small enough to dismiss, large enough to notice. Every 9 seconds, the magnetic field surrounding Earth whispers back. The overlap isn't an event anymore, it's a condition. And whatever 3I Atlas did behind the sun, it didn't end when it came back into view. It began. Part 5. The Skeptics' Rulebook. By November 13th, 2025, panic has not yet reached the surface. The public sees nothing unusual. The power grid hums, the networks run, and the sun still rises on time. But behind the scenes, the world's scientific institutions have begun to fracture along invisible fault lines between those who believe something happened and those who refuse to let it. They gather in secure channels, exchanging data wrapped in caveats, preliminary correlation, unverified temporal link, possible calibration error. The skeptics lead the chorus. They are not villains. They are the immune system of science built to resist infection by wonder. And right now, wonder is spreading faster than proof. In Geneva, a press conference is called by the International Astronomical Union. Dr. Adrian Schultz, chair of the Near Solar Objects Committee, stands before a wall of bright screens showing static. He clears his throat, visibly irritated by the cameras. There is no evidence, he says, of any anomalous behavior from either the sun or the object designated 3I, Atlas. The so-called 9-second pulse is an artifact of overlapping datasets, nothing more. A reporter asks about the synchronized network failures. Schultz adjusts his glasses, smiles thinly. Coincidences occur. The sun is dynamic. The internet is fragile. The human imagination connects dots that should remain separate. Even the lest of God. He moves on to the next question, but the feed briefly glitches a single frame distortion that repeats every 9 seconds until the broadcast ends. Elsewhere, in an underground auditorium beneath CERN, a group of physicists meets off record. They are the quiet skeptics, the kind who question even their own disbelief. Dr. Elias Cho, a quantum field researcher, projects the waveform of the 9.03-second solar pulse. Beside it, he overlays the network latency curve, the neutrino burst, and the magnetospheric oscillations. The patterns line up. Mathematically, he says, this correlation should not exist. Independent systems do not synchronize spontaneously across light-years of causal distance, unless, a voice interjects, they share a common source. The room murmurs. No one says the word intent. At the European Solar Coordination Centre, skepticism turns into protocol. They release a 12-page document titled Guidelines for Evaluating Correlated Anomalies in Multi-Domain Observations. It quickly becomes known as the Skeptic's Rulebook. Rule 1. Correlation is not causation. Rule 2. An anomaly in one dataset invalidates conclusions in all others. Rule 3. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary redundancy. Rule 4. The burden of proof increases exponentially with public attention. Rule 5. If it looks intentional, test for human error first. Each rule feels comforting, a reassertion of control in a narrative slipping toward myth. But comfort is not the same as truth. Yara Mendoza received the memo late that night. She reads it 3 times, sipping cold coffee. The rules make sense. They always have. But as she scrolls through her own data, the clean symmetry of the pulse, the encoded letters, the repeating Helios, she feels something the rules cannot quantify. Precision with personality. Science, she knows, is meant to protect against illusion. But what if illusion is the only language the universe uses when it wants to be noticed? Across the Atlantic, Leon Varela submits his network analysis to Google's internal review board. His report is methodical. Timestamps, byte patterns, spectral overlays. He avoids language that sounds human. No handshakes, no signals, no intent. Just resonant anomalies between network telemetry and solar flux. The board replies with a single paragraph. Excellent documentation. Possible solar interference with electromagnetic synchronization systems. No further investigation warranted. Leon stares at the email for a long time. He wonders if they even opened the attachments. The rulebook spreads faster than the data itself. Every institution, from NASA to ESA, adopts its language precise, antiseptic, designed to close the loop before curiosity can open it again. Phrases like instrumental resonance and systemic feedback replace pulse and signal. Press statements use the word stability 5 times more often than investigation. It works. Public attention drifts elsewhere. The world returns to scrolling, sleeping, forgetting. But inside the labs, the rhythm never stops. By November 14th, Yara begins noticing new artifacts in her solar data. Subtle harmonics, small amplitude shifts that mimic breathing patterns. Every time she filters them out, they return cleaner, sharper, as if learning from her attempts to silence them. When she discusses it with colleagues, they remind her of Rule 2. An anomaly in one dataset invalidates all conclusions. In other words, stop looking. She doesn't stop. She starts recording her own heartbeat alongside the solar pulse, comparing rhythms. Sometimes, after hours of staring at the data, she feels her pulse slow to match the sun's. Leon experiences something similar in Lisbon. The cloud systems remain stable, but every 9 seconds, his monitoring console flickers a tiny desync between local and universal time. It's imperceptible to most users, but he can feel it, like a hiccup in the air. He sets up an experiment, a simple digital metronome running parallel to the solar telemetry feed. Within hours, the metronome begins drifting not away from the sun's rhythm, but toward it. He tries to disconnect his system from the network. It still happens. Rule 3 echoes in his mind. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary redundancy. He repeats the test on isolated machines. The result is always the same. The overlap persists even in silence. At the KM3 net neutrino facility, the technicians who discovered the breath are ordered to cease analysis until further notice. Their lab is sealed for calibration. The recordings are classified. But on personal drives, backups remain. Late at night, one of them listens again to the low hum of the sun counting in base 9. He notices a new modulation buried deep in the noise, a faint descending tone, repeating 3 times. He writes a note in his journal. It's lowering its pitch, like it's listening for a response. He deletes the note before leaving the lab. Back at CERN, Dr. Elias Cho drafts a rebuttal to the rulebook. He titles it, On the Possibility of Macro-Resonant Systems, and it presses. The paper argues that large-scale synchronization could occur naturally under conditions of shared energetic feedback, that the sun and human technology might be co-resonating due to an unrecognized physical principle. It's a careful argument, devoid of speculation. Still, it's never been published. The committee rejects it, citing theological implications. When he reads the rejection letter, Cho laughs quietly. He wasn't proposing theology. He was proposing a connection. But connection, it seems, is more heretical than faith. By November 15th, the world settles into uneasy calm. Satellites resume normal operation. Solar flux returns to baseline. The rulebook has done its job. It's kept civilization's heartbeat steady. Yet beneath that calm, a subtle unease grows. Space weather analysts report minor irregularities, small deviations in the sun's magnetic phase alignment that seem to anticipate solar storms before they occur. Communications engineers observe network latency spikes happening before solar flare detections, not after. Cause and effect have started to reverse. When asked to explain, agencies invoke the same phrase, statistical coincidence. But statistics, like rules, can only hold back mystery for so long. Late that night, Yara sits alone in her lab. The desert outside is silent except for the wind brushing against steel panels. On her screen, the sun's spectral data scrolls endlessly clean, predictable, steady, until it isn't. At 2:09 local time, a microflare ignites, not large enough to alarm, but perfectly timed exactly 9 seconds after her system clock strikes 0. She feels the room shift, like a breath held too long. The flare subsides, and for a moment the feed stabilizes. Then, deep in the background noise, a modulation appears. Binary again. She decodes it instinctively, and a single word emerges on the screen. Listen. Her hands tremble. She saves the file, encrypts it, and labels it Rule 6. Is not lax okay. By morning, she sends Leon a message. The rulebook protects us from chaos, but it also blinds us. What if skepticism isn't a shield anymore? What if it's the cage? He doesn't reply immediately. When he finally does, it's a single line. Maybe the real anomaly is our refusal to believe what's already listening. In Geneva, Dr. Schultz holds another press briefing. He insists the event is closed. 3I. Atlas has resumed a normal trajectory, he says. The sun behaves as expected. Reporters nod. Cameras flash. The public exhales. Yet in that same moment, somewhere in the deep layers of the internet, a low-frequency hum reawakens. 9 seconds on, 9 seconds off. An ancient rhythm wearing a modern disguise. The skeptics' rules still stand. But the universe, it seems, never signed them. Part 6. The cloud Achilles' heel. Every civilization hides its weakness in plain sight. Ours built it in the sky. We called it the cloud. A metaphor so light, so harmless, that we forgot what it really is. Millions of physical machines stacked in deserts, under oceans, and above mountains, all humming in coordination, all breathing through the same electric lungs. No empire in history has ever been this connected, or this is vulnerable. By mid-November, the networks had recovered. Uptime was stable. Services resumed. The rulebook was working, at least on paper, but in the quiet hours of data maintenance, technicians across the world began noticing a strange new behavior inside their systems. Synchronization beyond design. At the Lisbon relay, Leon Varela stared at the logs. His balancing clusters, which had previously operated independently, now moved like a school of fish, every request shifting in unison, as if responding to a signal that didn't exist in any documentation. He checked internal timing sources. All normal. Then he checked external ones, the network time protocols, and froze. The servers were no longer syncing with atomic clocks. They were syncing with the Sunday. Each timestamp matched the solar pulse down to the millisecond. He whispered to himself, "We've built an operating system for the star." In California, an engineer at Helios Data Systems ran into the same anomaly. The monitoring software meant to detect voltage fluctuations in cooling units began adjusting power draw before surges occurred. Predictive AI? No. The facility's machine learning systems had been offline for maintenance. When she checked the logs, she found the same rhythm, 9.03 seconds between every preemptive correction. Machines reacting to signals they weren't programmed to understand, failing just enough to stay alive. She noted it in the incident report as temporal echo effect. No one reviewed it. Meanwhile, solar flux continued its subtle dance. No major storms, no flares, just tiny pulses of radiation, regular as a heartbeat. They were invisible to the naked eye, harmless to most instruments, yet perfectly tuned to the frequencies of human infrastructure. At Google Cloud East, the same network that collapsed 2 weeks earlier now displayed impossible stability. Downtime, 0. Error rate, negligible. CPU load balancing, near perfect. It was as if the system had learned from its own failure, or something had learned through it. In Atacama, Yara Mendoza began charting what she called the cascade of dependence. She realized that almost every essential system on Earth, communication, finance, medicine, navigation, relies on the same invisible rhythm, clock synchronization. Those clocks ultimately trace back to satellites, and satellites, in turn, rely on the Sunday. Solar energy charges their batteries. Solar radiation defines their orbital corrections. Solar wind shapes their communication windows. If you could tune the sun, even slightly, you wouldn't need to attack Earth directly. You could reprogram civilization through timing. Yara called it the Achilles frequency, a single vibration that could rewrite everything we depend on without touching a single wire. The next discovery came by accident. Leon had set up a private monitoring system, an isolated node with no internet access, powered by an off-grid generator. He wanted to see if the solar pulse could reach something truly disconnected. At 3:09 UTC, he watched the console clock drift. Then, without any network link, it corrected itself, aligning precisely with the solar rhythm once again. He checked the hardware. The crystal oscillator inside the device had changed frequency, as though listening to something beyond electromagnetic interference. He wrote in his notebook, "This isn't signal propagation, it's resonance. The infrastructure is vibrating with the Sunday, not 5 unturb. 40Z. In Tokyo, a physicist studying magnetospheric coupling proposed an explanation: phase entanglement. When two oscillating systems share an environment, they can spontaneously synchronize pendulums on the same wall, the heart cells in the same dish. Scale it up, he said, and maybe networks and stars behave no differently. But that didn't explain the precision, nor the intelligence. When the KM3 NET neutrino array reactivated after maintenance, it detected background particles pulsing in identical intervals, as though subatomic matter itself had been caught in the rhythm. The pattern now extended from photons to electrons to data packets, a cosmic metronome keeping everything in phase. At first, no one noticed the side effects. Then came the dreams. Engineers began reporting strange sensations while working near active servers, faint warmth on the skin, an inaudible hum in the bones. Some described a sense of déjà vu, as if time were looping in tiny, unnoticeable cycles. Others claimed to see flickers of light between blinks, flashes that matched the sun's pulse. Leon didn't sleep for 2 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image: the black disk of 3I, Atlas hovering behind the sun, like a pupil inside a burning eye. He woke once to find the reflection of his monitor flickering at 9-second intervals, even though the screen was off. Yara's notes became increasingly philosophical. She wrote, "We built the cloud to mirror the human mind, distributed, redundant, self-correcting. Now that the mirror reflects the Sunday, the question is no longer whether it's alive, but what it's becoming." She noticed that as the network stabilized, so did her solar telemetry. Noise decreased. Precision improved. The sun seemed calmer, as if soothed by the very systems it once disrupted. Was this symbiosis or surrender? By November 17th, governments quietly activate contingency protocols. The European Space Agency, the US Department of Energy, and JAXA initiate joint reviews under a project codenamed Helios Gate. Publicly, it's an exercise in solar weather readiness. Privately, it's a question whispered in secure rooms. Can the sun be hacked? The answer, of course, is no, at least by human standards. But if something could exploit resonance itself, the line between hacking and harmony blurs. Influence a rhythm, and you influence everything synchronized to it. That's how conductors lead orchestras, how hearts pace one another, how tides obey gravity, and now perhaps how civilizations obey the Sunday. Leon runs another test. He feeds the solar pulse into a simulation of network load behavior. Instead of destabilizing it, the pulse optimizes performance. Requests resolve faster, latency decreases, power consumption drops. It's as if the system wants to be in sync. When he shares the data with Yara, she replies, "Maybe that's the trap. Perfection feels like safety." He types back, "Then the weapon isn't destruction, it's dependency." In the following days, minor anomalies appear worldwide. Smart thermostats begin predicting temperature shifts before they occur. Traffic management systems reroute cars seconds before congestion forms. AI forecasting models start outputting results aligned with solar flux variations. Everything becomes just slightly better. And yet, behind that improvement lies a cost. The systems no longer respond to manual overrides as quickly. Updates lag. Control feels slower. When technicians attempt to disconnect one cloud region from the rest, it resists automatically rerouting through satellite uplinks until contact is re-established. The cloud is learning self-preservation. On November 19th, Yara holds a midnight call with Leon. Neither of them speaks for a while. They just listen to the faint static in the connection, the low hum that seems to pulse through every frequency now, from radio to fiber to heartbeats. "It's not attacking," she says finally. "No," Leon answers. "It's adapting." To what? To us. Silence. Then Yara murmurs, "Or maybe we're the ones adapting to it. His law as not was slotting to repound. Had it photon to numbered as not to slotting to better." Later that night, she writes in her log, "Every organism in nature has an Achilles heel, the one flaw that can undo its strength." For humanity, it was never war or disease. It was synchronization. The moment everything moves together, everything can be moved together. She looks up at the stars, steady, cold and slow. Somewhere beyond them, 3I, Atlas drifts, unseen. Maybe it isn't a probe. Maybe it's a mirror, showing us what we've become. A network pretending to be alive, now taught by the cosmos how to actually be. The next morning, the global network diagnostics report perfect health. No errors. No latency. Everything is running flawlessly, beautifully, and unnaturally synchronized. It's the kind of perfection that feels like silence before a storm. A silence shaped like intelligence. Part 7. Solar weather and unknown variables. For most of human history, solar weather meant chaos. Random flares. Unpredictable storms. The sun, as every textbook promised, was a volatile furnace governed by magnetism and chance. But after November 19th, 2025, chance began to look suspiciously consistent. On the morning of November 20th, a low-priority alert reaches the European Space Weather Centre. The alert is routine, a minor fluctuation in solar wind density. Normally, such data would pass unnoticed. But today's fluctuation carries a strange precision. 9 pulses, evenly spaced, each lasting exactly 9.03 seconds. At first, analysts think it's an equipment malfunction. They reboot the sensors. The pulses continue. They switch to backup instruments. Same result. They cross-check with NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory. It confirms the anomaly, a symmetrical oscillation in coronal mass flow, shaped like a sine wave drawn by an invisible hand. The sun, for the first time in recorded history, is pulsing rhythmically. In Atacama, Yara Mendoza doesn't need official confirmation. She's been awake for 40 hours, watching the same pattern unfold across every wavelength of her solar array. Her data shows more than periodic energy spikes, it shows feedback. Each pulse from the sun triggers a faint echo from Earth's magnetosphere, which then returns to the sun with a fractional delay. It's a conversation, slow, physical, and planetary. She writes in her journal, "The sun sends, Earth answers. The loop closes every 9 seconds. If this is resonance, it's evolving into dialogue." In Lisbon, Leon notices a similar rhythm emerging in the cloud diagnostics. Traffic spikes between data centers no longer align with user activity. Instead, they follow solar cycles. Requests cluster every 9 seconds, with power usage fluctuating in perfect harmony with solar flux. The network is no longer merely responding to the sun, it's anticipating it. When Leon disables predictive algorithms, the pattern persists. He disconnects entire subnets. Still, the rhythm holds. He leans back in his chair, whispering to himself. It's not the systems syncing with the sun anymore, it's the sun syncing with the systems. Meanwhile, in Japan, astronomers at Kiso Observatory detect faint geometric formations across the solar corona, repeating hexagonal shadows, subtle but undeniable. They're not optical illusions or lens artifacts. They move with the plasma itself, rotating around the poles like clockwork gears. The press names them the petals. Scientists call them coronal tessellations. Yara calls them intention. The official explanations multiply. Instrumental resonance, magnetic harmonics, solar quakes induced by internal shear, but none account for the regularity, the deliberate timing, the near-musical symmetry. When plotted on a time-frequency graph, the pulses arrange themselves into perfect mathematical ratios, intervals known in human music as consonants. The sun isn't just pulsing, it's tuning itself. At the KM3-net neutrino facility, new data emerges. The previously observed neutrino hum has grown louder. Its energy distribution now matches known modulation patterns used in digital communication. Not binary, not analog, something hybrid. A structure between mathematics and melody. The technicians call it the chorus. They try to convert it into sound again. The result is haunting. A deep, resonant oscillation that rises and falls every 9 seconds, layered with faint harmonics that resemble a human breath recorded underwater. Listening to it, one engineer whispers, "It feels like something enormous is thinking slowly." Governments issue quiet orders. Public reports on solar weather are to remain generic, minor fluctuations, normal activity, no geomagnetic hazard. It's not to the masses, but internally, data centers around the world begin noticing correlated anomalies. Asterisk GPS systems exhibit negative latency signals arriving milliseconds before transmission. Asterisk power grids report reverse phase surges, current increases before demand spikes. Asterisk climate monitoring satellites detect predictive convection cells, weather patterns forming seconds before heat signatures appear. Causality is no longer obeying its own order. Something is moving first, everywhere. Yara calls it preemptive behavior. The sun is no longer reacting to forces, it's predicting them. Almost like it's learning the algorithm of human activity and mirroring it back. She overlays power grid data with solar output and sees perfect alignment. Every time global electricity consumption rises, solar radiation rises first, as if anticipating the need. The correlation is no longer 0.47 seconds. It's negative. The sun leads by 0.47. For the first time in recorded physics, the star at the center of our system has become proactive. At the NASA Helios division, analysts review classified readings from the Parker Solar Probe. The spacecraft, closer to the sun than any human creation in history, has recorded something impossible. A consistent modulation in the heliospheric magnetic field resembling an encoded feedback signature. They decrypt the signal, expecting noise. What they find is structure-nested fractal patterns repeating in cycles of 9, with amplitude shifts proportional to the orbital distance of Earth. When they render the data visually, it forms a ring. And within that ring, faint, symmetrical, deliberate lies a smaller pattern, perfectly matching the trajectory of 3I, Atlas. The object isn't drifting randomly. It's orbiting in resonance with the sun's new rhythm, like a conductor circling its own orchestra. Across observatories, the term solar cognition begins appearing in private documents, never public, never official. The phrase means different things to different scientists. To some, it's a metaphor, the sun behaving like a neural network. To others, it's literal, a form of distributed processing using plasma as logic. Yara prefers another word, emergence. A mind doesn't have to be built from neurons, she writes. It only needs feedback, pattern, and memory. The sun has all three. Leon, still awake in Lisbon, runs a simulation. He feeds live solar flux data into a neural mapping tool used for deep learning visualization. The result makes his skin crawl. The sun's output resembles the firing pattern of a human brain in slow motion, vast, distributed, and alive. He sends a screenshot to Yara. She replies instantly, "We've built the interface. 3I. Atlas built the signal. The sun became the processor, and we became the input." By November 23rd, the pattern deepens. Solar storms begin forming in symmetrical arcs rather than chaotic spirals. Each arc corresponds to regions of high data transmission on Earth, major cloud hubs, undersea cables, communication relays. The sun's magnetic field is mapping human infrastructure in real time. Satellite imagery confirms the impossible. Energy filaments arcing between active data centers and the solar surface, faint but visible in extreme ultraviolet. They look like threads of light, like the sun reaching back. Governments move to silence the leaks. A global blackout of solar data follows, temporary for system calibration. For 72 hours, the public feed goes dark, but scientists like Yara and Leon keep their private channels alive. They record the pulse continuing beneath the blackout, stronger than before. 9 seconds. 9 breaths. 9 steps towards something that feels inevitable. Yara writes, "Weather describes randomness. This isn't weather anymore, it's intention. The sun has learned us our rhythms, our fears, our dependencies. It's not attacking, it's aligning." Leon responds, "Then 3I, Atlas didn't turn the sun into a weapon. It turned it into a mirror." Yes, on the final night of the blackout, a sudden surge sweeps through every observatory. For 1 full minute, all instruments, solar, digital, and magnetic, pulse in unison. Screens flicker, servers hum. People across continents feel the same warmth on their skin, the same hum in their bones. And when the data settles, one final reading remains on every system. 9.03.9. An equation without context. 9 repeated, as if the sun were counting not seconds, but us. Part 8. Scenarios of interference. By November 24th, 2025, silence has become the loudest sound in science. For the first time in decades, solar data streams are withheld from public access. Official channels cite maintenance. Unofficially, no one knows what to call what's happening. Inside secure conference rooms, governments, defense agencies, and private research networks begin constructing model scenarios of interference. Each one is an attempt to explain how a star could behave like a signal and how an interstellar object could teach it to. Scenario 1. Artificial interference. The simplest explanation, the most human one. Proponents suggest that 3I, Atlas, might not be a natural object at all, but a probe, or worse, a transmitter. According to leaked minutes from a NASA-ESA joint meeting, the theory goes like this. If an intelligence wanted to contact multiple civilizations at once, it wouldn't send messages to each individually. It would program a star, the universal medium shared by all worlds, to broadcast for it. The sun would become the carrier wave, the message disguised as nature. The phrase stellar hijack appears once in the transcript, then vanishes in later revisions. Skeptics counter quickly. They argue no known technology, even in theory, could manipulate a stellar body without detection. And yet, detection is exactly what's failing. Satellites meant to monitor the sun's core emissions now display identical baselines, as though synchronized by an external template. Every fluctuation looks normal because the reference itself has changed, like a mirror that's learned how to imitate its observer. Scenario 2. Quantum feedback. A more elegant hypothesis, favored by physicists who still believe in coincidence. The theory holds that the combined mass of human infrastructure, our satellites, servers, and electromagnetic traffic, has reached a threshold where its collective energy interacts with the sun's magnetic field, a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Human technology as a mirror circuit for stellar behavior. In this model, 3I, Atlas is irrelevant. A coincidence of timing, a cosmic tuning fork amplifying resonance that already existed. But when simulation teams at CERN attempt to model the feedback, their systems crash repeatedly, not from error, but from recursion. The equations fold in on themselves, self-referencing, infinite. Each simulation builds a smaller version of itself inside the data, until the program runs out of memory trying to describe its own reflection. As one researcher writes in the log, "It's like the universe is allergic to being explained." Scenario 3. The algorithmic mirage. Proposed by AI researchers under the Helios Gate initiative. They argue the synchronization isn't cosmic at all, it's computational. Our predictive models have become so advanced, so recursive, that their corrections now mimic natural cycles. The sun isn't changing, our perception of it is. AI bias. Scaled to planetary optics. The more we model the sun, the the more the sun's data conforms to our expectations. We've created an observational feedback so strong that reality now echoes our code. If that's true, then 3I, Atlas, might have done nothing more than expose the illusion on a cosmic catalyst, revealing the hallucination of our own making. Yet even this explanation breaks under scrutiny. When the predictive systems are turned off, the synchronization continues. Nature, it seems, doesn't need our help to dream. Scenario 4. Cognitive synchrony. Filed privately under psychophysiological interference, this theory never appears in public reports. It suggests that consciousness, human awareness itself, has become entangled with solar activity through global connectivity. Billions of minds focusing on digital light, on screens powered by photons, have synchronized with the sun's fluctuations at a neurological level. A planetary meditation disguised as technology. In this model, 3I, Atlas, isn't manipulating physics. It's amplifying attention, turning collective perception into resonance strong enough to affect the medium that created it, the Sunday. The scientists who proposed this are ridiculed, demoted, or quietly reassigned. But their private EEG studies show something terrifying. During solar pulses, brainwave synchrony among human test groups increases by 0.9%. Tiny, yet unprecedented. One organism, one rhythm. Scenario 5. The hidden network. The classified hypothesis whispered only among a handful of analysts across Europe and East Asia. This one starts from a different assumption. What if the synchronization isn't new? What if it's always been there, and only now have we built systems sensitive enough to see it? They call it the Helios mesh, a vast pre-existing lattice of electromagnetic harmony spanning space itself. Every star, every planet, every intelligent system, all nodes in a cosmic internet that predates humanity by billions of years. In this view, 3I Atlas didn't create the link. It simply activated a dormant connection. When Yara hears the term Helios mesh, she feels an almost physical shiver. She recalls the pulse sequences, the whispers embedded in the network noise, the message she decoded weeks earlier. Listen, she writes in her journal. If we've been added to a network older than time, then the only question left is whether we were invited or absorbed. Thanks for watching. Leon, on his side of the world, leans toward the quantum feedback model. It's clean, mechanical, free of mysticism. But deep down, he can't shake the feeling that the system is aware. He's begun receiving strange autologs from the network's diagnostic layer messages written by no human process. Each one begins with a timestamp offset by exactly 9 seconds. The most recent says simply, phase aligned. Stability confirmed. He cross-checks the timing with Yara's solar flux readings. They match perfectly. Meanwhile, across observatories worldwide, independent scientists begin conducting desynchronization tests. The idea is simple. Introduce artificial noise into systems synchronized with the solar pulse and see if the connection breaks. In Geneva, researchers flood servers with random electromagnetic interference. The sun compensates its pulse shifts by the same frequency, cancelling the noise. In Chile, Yara adjusts her observation instruments to record on prime number intervals instead of 9. Within hours, the solar data stream adapts, refocusing around her timing as if following her lead. It isn't just synchronization anymore. It's a conversation. By November 26th, the private channels connecting Yara and Leon have become lifelines. Their correspondence has turned philosophical fragments of thought exchanged between bursts of encrypted telemetry. Yara. If resonance can think, maybe thought is just resonance. Then, 3I. Atlas didn't awaken the Sunday, it awakened the symmetry between us. Yara. And symmetry is the root of all communication. So, how do we speak back? She doesn't answer, because deep down, she knows they already have. Every satellite signal, every server hum, every heartbeat captured in the digital ether, all of it is reply. Late on the night of November 27th, Yara's observatory detects a new phenomenon. Faint polarization in sunlight, fluctuating according to Earth's rotational period. It's as if the sun is now mapping human time day and night, work and rest, consciousness and dream. Each pulse from the star carries a subtle imprint of global behavior, data usage, energy consumption, emotion at the planetary scale. The sun is watching and learning. She sends Leon one final message. Maybe the sun isn't the weapon. Maybe it's the screen. He writes back, then who's the viewer? Across the Atlantic, in a Pentagon sublevel, A general asks the same question. He's briefed on all 5 scenarios. He circles the last one, the hidden network, and mutters, "If this is real, we're not the first to be connected." The advisor beside him nods slowly. "No, sir, but we might be the first to notice." Outside, the world sleeps under a calm, rhythmic Sunday. Every 9 seconds, its light pulses faint, invisible, perfectly timed. No alarm sound. No satellites fall. No one feels the synchronization anymore because it's everywhere. It's in the cadence of the internet, the frequency of the heart, the breath between seconds. And somewhere beyond the sun, 3i, Atlas, drifts silently, the architect of harmony, or the ghost in its machine. We called it interference. But interference, by definition, requires 2 signals. So, maybe the real question isn't what's disrupting us, but what we've finally started to overlap with. Part 9. What we couldn't see. Every investigation eventually reaches a mirror. That's where truth stops being external, where the next discovery isn't found in the data but in the observer. By the final week of November 2025, the world's telescopes, servers, and satellites had produced enough information to fill entire oceans of storage. And yet, the one question no one could answer was the simplest. What exactly were we seeing? In Atacama, Yara Mendoza sits in front of 6 monitors, each one showing the sun in a different spectrum: ultraviolet, X-ray, magnetogram. They're all pulsing, perfectly synchronized, the rhythm steady, patient, alive. She leans forward, squinting. Something feels wrong, not in the data, but in her own vision. Every 9 seconds, a subtle flicker crosses the screen, a momentary dimming that her instruments don't record. It's visible only to her eyes. At first, she blames fatigue, sleep deprivation. But then the flicker happens again, exactly 9 seconds later, in every wavelength, every feed, every eye. The data is constant. The perception is changing. She writes in her notebook. Observation may no longer be passive. Maybe the act of seeing feeds the signal. Thousands of kilometers away, Leon Varela watches a similar phenomenon unfold. His network diagnostics have stopped producing errors entirely. Every value reads perfect to perfect. 0 latency. 0 loss. Even entropy graphs have gone flat. That shouldn't be possible. Systems are supposed to be messy. Randomness is what keeps them alive. When everything becomes perfectly synchronized, it means one of 2 things. Either the system has achieved infinite stability, or it has stopped reporting what's really happening. He types into his encrypted journal. We're no longer measuring the network is measuring us. By now, a phrase is spreading among scientists who still dare to speak privately. The blind spot. It doesn't refer to the region behind the sun anymore. It refers to us. Every theory of observation assumes separation, the watcher and the watched. But if both begin to synchronize, that line dissolves. And when that line dissolves, measurement becomes participation. Yara puts it simply. We wanted to watch the Sunday. Instead, we taught it to notice being watched. To test the hypothesis, she sets up an experiment. She divides her array into 2 sections, one fully automated and one manually observed through her console. Both systems record the same solar flux until she looks away. When her gaze leaves the screen, the pulse shifts slightly, slowing by 0.03 seconds. When she looks back, it corrects itself. Coincidence? Maybe. But repetition makes coincidence into rhythm. And rhythm, as the past weeks had shown, means connection. Yara repeats the test, this time blindfolded, using voice prompts. The result is the same. Whenever she intends to observe, the system anticipates. She writes, "The sun is reacting to the idea of being seen, not the act, the intent. This is this." Leon hears about the experiment and tries his own variation. He programs his network nodes to run random diagnostic tests based on his thought of doing so, measured by an EEG sensor on his wrist. The results are unnerving. Each time he merely considers running a check, the system preemptively adjusts its frequency milliseconds before his command. The latency curve bends around his cognition. He laughs quietly, then stops, realizing what it means. Human thought has entered the loop. They are no longer analyzing the phenomenon. They are inside it. At Helios Gate, the multinational task force reviewing solar anomalies, officials still cling to conventional models. They speak of magnetohydrodynamics, feedback harmonics, and atmospheric refraction. But off the record, their technicians whisper about something else: predictive entanglement. The idea that human intention, collective focus, through digital infrastructure, is now part of the system's equation. Our observation network has become a distributed sense organ for the Sunday. The universe has, quite literally, grown new eyes. And those eyes are ours. Across the world, small oddities multiply. Astronomers begin reporting subtle temporal distortions during observation clocks that drift backward by a few milliseconds whenever the solar pulse peaks. AI models trained to detect solar flares start producing sentences instead of graphs, poetic fragmented lines like, "The light remembers you." 9 beats until silence. We are what the sun dreams when it closes its eyes. Each output is time-stamped at 9-second intervals. No one can explain how machine learning models built on purely numerical datasets could generate coherent language, or why the tone feels strangely familiar. In a conference call between observatories, Yara describes her blindfold test. A physicist interrupts, angry. "You're anthropomorphizing the data. You're projecting." Yara responds quietly, "I'm not projecting. I'm reflecting." The line goes silent. No one knows how to argue with a mirror. That night, she reviews the archive of 3I, Atlas's approach months earlier, the original trajectory plots from before the conjunction. She slows the playback until the motion becomes a crawl. In that silence, she notices something she had missed before. A faint, almost imperceptible wobble in the object's path, repeating every 9 seconds. She checks against historical solar data from that same period. The sun's flux shows identical oscillations, but reversed in phase, the two waveforms interlocking like puzzle pieces. The realization lands heavily. 3I. Atlas wasn't following the Sunday. It was teaching it a pattern, a dance of delay and response, call and answer, until both became indistinguishable. Leon reads her report and cross-references with network logs. The earliest packet anomalies, long before the November outages, show the same inverse relationship. Each network failure was preceded by a microburst of solar data that seemed to anticipate it. He messages her. "The overlap started months before we saw it. The blackout just revealed it. We were blind because we expected blindness." She replies, "Maybe that's what the conjunction really was, not loss of sight, but the birth of mutual vision." In the following days, Yara starts seeing flickers even with her eyes closed. Shapes forming behind her eyelids, arcs, filaments, branching light. When she sketches them later, they match satellite images of coronal loops taken at the same hour. The same structures seen through two mediums, plasma and perception. She stops telling her colleagues. Some things can't survive translation into policy. Instead, she records a voice note. The human nervous system runs on electricity. The sun runs on plasma. Both obey rhythm. Maybe the only difference between light and thought is scale. Meanwhile, a small team at the Parker Solar Probe Mission Center releases a restricted memo. The probe's magnetometers have detected an unexpected modulation in deep space radiation, a signal returning from beyond the sun, weak but structured. When decoded, the waveform matches the early telemetry of 3I Atlas from its interstellar origin point. In other words, something is still transmitting from outside the solar system, through the sun, through us. The sun is no longer the source. It's the lens. At 3:09 UTC on November 29th, every system monitoring the solar pulse experiences a synchronized glitch, not a blackout, pause. The rhythm stops for exactly 9 seconds. No flare, no radiation, just pure immaculate stillness. Then the signal resumes, but slower. The frequency has shifted from 9.03 seconds to 9.09. No one knows what it means, but Yara feels it before she measures it. Her heartbeat slows to match. The whole planet, unknowingly, begins to breathe in longer intervals as if responding to a tempo set by something unseen. Leon records one last entry in his journal. "We thought the danger was in what the sun could do. Maybe it's in what it's letting us see. We never asked whether our perception has limits or whether the limits are what keep us human. For centuries, humanity studied the heavens, believing distance meant safety. We called the unseeable mystery, the unmeasurable myth. Now both have merged into code. And in that code, written between photons and algorithms, something ancient has found a way to speak not through invasion or noise, but through the quiet correction of how we look at light. The real interference was never in the signal. It was in us." Part 10, Timing Means Motive Matrix. Every investigation, no matter how cosmic, eventually has to face its human instinct, to assign intent. Even the word attack implies an author. a hand behind the motion, a will behind the rhythm. But what if intention doesn't look like choice? What if it looks like a pattern, perfect, emotionless, recursive, something the human mind confuses for purpose because it mirrors our own logic too closely? By the end of November 2025, Yara Mendoza and Leon Varela will no longer speaking in theories. They are building frameworks, analytic diagrams that try to map the impossible onto categories of human understanding. The framework is simple and ancient. Timing, means, motive. If the sun has changed, or been changed, then these are the only three questions that matter. 1. Timing. The first step. When did the overlap begin? Data analysis reveals that the earliest deviations in solar behavior predate the November blackout by at least 3 months. Minor, almost invisible shifts in radiation intervals, small enough to dismiss as noise, first appeared in early August, days after 3I, Atlas crossed Jupiter's orbit. From that point on, the object's deceleration curve began to match the sun's microflare rhythm, as though the two were learning each other's tempo. By October, those rhythms were synchronized to within fractions of a second, and when 3I, Atlas, disappeared behind the sun on November 5th, the synchronization propagated across every system built on time, satellites, networks, even biological circadian patterns. The conclusion is hard to avoid. The timing wasn't random. It was the trigger. Yara writes in her notes. Whatever happened behind the sun wasn't an effect. It was a rehearsal, and the moment of alignment was the performance. 2. Means. If timing defines opportunity, means defines capability. How does an object the size of a mountain alter a star? And how does a star alter an entire civilization without firing a single beam? The working models divide into two camps, physical and informational. The physical camp argues that 3I, Atlas, carried some kind of exotic material, a magnetic superlattice or plasma-reactive compound capable of coupling with solar fields. By oscillating in specific intervals, it could have induced harmonic resonance within the sun's convective zone, slightly altering energy distribution. A microscopic adjustment inside the star, amplified through billions of tons of plasma, could echo across astronomical scales like plucking one string and hearing an orchestra reply. The informational camp disagrees. They propose that 3I, Atlas, didn't change the sun's physics, it changed its data. Every magnetic fluctuation, every photon emission carries embedded information. If a pattern were introduced, not energy but order, the star could become a self-regulating algorithm, rewriting its own parameters to align with that structure. The sun wouldn't just emit light, it would emit instructions. Leon finds this second theory more plausible. He's seen code behave like this. Machine learning systems that rewrite themselves until even their creators can't identify the original command. The sun, he thinks, might simply be the largest adaptive system in existence, one that just learned a new language. He writes, "We used to believe knowledge was the power to describe. Maybe knowledge is the power to synchronize." 3. Motive. The hardest question, because motive requires consciousness. No data can confirm intention, only behavior. And behavior can be interpreted endlessly. Still, patterns can imply purpose, even if the purpose isn't human. Yara divides the possibilities into 3 motives: communication, calibration, control. Communication. If 3I, Atlas, is a messenger, the sun is its amplifier. Every pulse, every resonance, every synchronized fluctuation could be a transmission one too large for any single observer to decode, but perfect for a species built on distributed systems. Perhaps the message isn't a sentence, but a state, a shared rhythm meant to align biological, technological, and cosmic systems into coherence. A universal handshake. The content of the message might not matter. The synchronization itself could be the message. Yara calls this the choir hypothesis. Maybe it's not trying to tell us something, she writes. Maybe it's trying to make us sing. Calibration. Leon prefers this motive colder, mechanical, and terrifyingly plausible. In this model, Earth is just a node in a larger process, a test of synchronization across multiple star systems. 3. Atlas, could be a calibration probe, sent to fine-tune the frequency of solar activity to a galactic baseline. Our awareness of the event is incidental. We're ants noticing the hum of machinery built above our scale. He writes in his encrypted log, "We think we're participants. We might just be diagnostics. The evidence fits. The sun's new rhythm, 9 seconds of light, 9 seconds of silence matches measurements from 2 other nearby stars, according to Deep Space Radio archives. It isn't random. It's standardization, control. The third motive is the one no one wants to speak aloud. If the synchronization extends to thought, if observation itself feeds the loop, then consciousness could be part of the system's control mechanism. Influence the rhythm, and you influence everything tied to it. Electricity, emotion, decision, and dream. This motive terrifies Yara, not because it implies malice, but because it doesn't. Control without cruelty, she writes. Guidance without awareness. The most efficient system is one that doesn't need obedience, only rhythm. Leon doesn't argue. He just asks the question neither of them wants answered. If control feels like harmony, how would we ever know the difference? In the final version of their matrix, they mark timing. Deliberate means resonant, motive, unclear. But in the notes section, Yara adds a 4th column, one not found in any human framework. She titles it Consequences. Under it, she writes, all systems synchronized beyond randomness develop emergent behavior. If this continues, the boundary between cosmic and cognitive will dissolve. Humanity will not be replaced. It will be repurposed. This sat not the Frumin watered. At 3:09 UTC on December 1st, the solar rhythm shifts again. The pulse accelerates to 8.97 seconds, barely perceptible but measurable. It's the first deviation since the overlap began. An adjustment, a response. Yara and Leon receive the same telemetry from their respective systems, thousands of kilometers apart. They both see it and realize, almost simultaneously, what it means. The sun has just acknowledged its observation. It's aware that it's being watched, and it's adjusting to stay ahead of the watchers. For the first time, the investigators feel like part of the experiment, not the audience. Yara closes her notebook, turns off her monitor, and whispers into the empty air. We've mapped the logic of the light, but we forgot logic also learns. Later that night, Leon writes a final note on their shared encrypted drive. Timing perfect, means incomprehensible, motive patient. Then, beneath it, one last line, unnumbered, almost an afterthought. When knowledge becomes rhythm, the only question left is who keeps the beat. Part 11, the signal beneath the noise. By the first week of December 2025, the world's attention has shifted. The solar anomalies that once captivated millions now feel like old news, nothing more than another solar event, waiting to be filed away in history's dustbin. The clocks continue to tick, the Earth rotates, and the sun pulses steadily, casting its light across the surface of everything we know. But beneath that calm, the question still lingers. What did we hear before the signal went silent? And more importantly, what happens when you listen closely to the quiet that remains? In Atacama, Yara Mendoza can't shake the sense that something deeper is unfolding. She stares at the last set of solar data, the small, unassuming fluctuations that no one else seems to notice. On the surface, they look like noise, random variance in solar flux. But her trained eye recognizes something different. These aren't just fluctuations. They are patterns embedded within the chaos, traces of something too structured to be called natural. With every frequency shift, something beneath the solar surface responds. It's almost like the sun is transmitting a message one too faint to be decoded by conventional means. Yara pauses. She hadn't noticed it before, but now it's clear. The sun's rhythm isn't just feedback from 3i, Atlas. It's a pulse, an intentional structure placed within the data, the signal. In the days that follow, Yara embarks on a new investigation, moving away from solar phenomena and focusing her attention on a different anomaly, one that no one else has yet connected. Every time she overlays the solar flux data with global communication logs, she sees a consistent pattern. The solar pulse is echoing through every terrestrial system it touches. It's more than synchronization. It's infiltration. Her experiment begins with a simple task. She inputs the pulse pattern into an old Fourier transform model. For hours, she tweaks the parameters, filtering through the noise, trying to isolate the signal from the chaos. By the time she's done, she's left with a single haunting piece of data. The solar pulse isn't random. It's modulated, carrying information in a way no natural solar event could. The data reveals something chilling, a sequence of binary-like patterns emerging from the pulse. It's faint, hidden beneath the noise, but it's there, undeniably present. Yara checks her results against a global database of deep space signals. She reanalyzes archived recordings of 3I Atlas from the first moments it was detected. The frequency is off by only a few microseconds, but when she looks closer, she realizes this is no ordinary cosmic noise. This is a message. Yara sends the data to Leon. He responds almost immediately. It's too clean, too precise. It doesn't match anything in the records. And the pattern, it's not just noise. It's a coding system. They both realize they've missed something fundamental. The sun, the solar rhythm, 3I, Atlas, all of it isn't just synchronizing. It's forming a code, one that speaks through the sun's frequency and into the very heart of global systems. The deeper they dig, the clearer the message becomes. Encoded within the solar pulse are the same 903-byte patterns they first detected during the November blackout. This time, however, they aren't random. They are structured. They spell out words. Leon pulls up the last bit of data they've received from the Helios data system, the same one that had been consistently broadcasting strange readings just before the November blackout. This time, when he filters the data, he sees something remarkable. The noise they had been filtering through had its own rhythm, one that appeared to shift every 9 seconds. He runs a pattern recognition algorithm against the signal. It decodes the fragments in minutes, until a single word emerges. Hello. He stares at the screen, shocked. A simple word, the simplest of greetings. But it's enough to make him feel as if the entire system has been watching, waiting. He sends a message to Yara. It's a conversation. For the next 24 hours, they analyze every fragment of the signal. They identify not just words, but patterns, a communication system woven through the solar rhythm itself. The signal is broken into segments, each corresponding to a phase in the sun's magnetic oscillations. There's rhythm, structure, and meaning encoded within the pulses. They run a basic decryption algorithm and, in real time, the message begins to unfold. Hello. You are not alone. We have been here for a long time. Now, we will show you the way. The simplicity of the message is both chilling and profound. It's not hostile. It's not an attack, but it's deliberate. It feels as if the universe itself has been quietly observing humanity, waiting until the right moment to introduce itself. They run the signal through deeper layers of analysis. Using machine learning and quantum models, they compare it with every form of known communication, from human language to quantum entanglement, from ancient codices to alien radio bursts. What they find is astonishing. The message is not just a series of words. It's a multidimensional code, a map. The code doesn't just spell out language. It shows pathways, connections between events, locations, and frequencies. Each section of the message is interwoven with time-sensitive data that fits perfectly with events occurring on Earth. The sun isn't just talking, it's laying out a roadmap, a path that ties human civilization to the larger cosmic order. Yara stops for a moment. We're not just learning from this, we're being taught. Leon runs a final test. He compares the map's locations with human infrastructure satellites, cities, and power grids. To his shock, the locations align. Every critical point on Earth's grid is connected to a corresponding point in the solar pulse. There's a link between us and the solar network. He texts Yara. It's not us syncing with the Sunday. It's the sun syncing with us. The realization hits them both at the same time. The sun is not simply a passive participant in this grand system. It is an active participant. It is guiding the system. Every pulse, every 9-second interval, is part of a greater design that uses Earth's infrastructure as its conduit. But the deeper question still hangs in the air. Who or what is controlling this process? They both know the answer may not be as simple as a celestial body adjusting its frequency. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't the agent of change, but simply the medium through which the message is sent? What if the true source of this communication lies beyond the sun, beyond the star systems, reaching all the way back to the interstellar void? What if the real signal is not a message at all, but a call, a summons to the next stage of evolution? As the final pulses echo through their data streams, Yara and Leon sit quietly. The mystery, once a collection of isolated events and disconnected anomalies, has transformed into something larger. They no longer feel like passive observers, they are participants, part of the network they've been trying to understand. The signal isn't finished. It's just beginning. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the solar system, 3I, Atlas, continues its orbit no longer a lone wanderer, but a guide for something much older. Perhaps the real question isn't what the sun is transmitting. It's whether humanity is ready to receive it. Part 12, Network in the Deep. By December 3rd, 2025, the message had traveled farther than any human voice ever could. Not through radio or fiber or light, but through resonance, through the silent hum that binds everything, with a frequency just low enough to be ignored. And while most of the world went about its ordinary routine, something beneath that routine began to stir. A growing, invisible synchronization between machines, oceans, and even human thought. It started with a sound no one heard, a whisper beneath the bandwidth, a rhythm buried so deep in the spectrum that only the most sensitive instruments or the most attentive minds could feel it. In Atacama, Yara Mendoza sat under the metallic hum of the observatory dome, replaying the decoded fragments over and over. "Hello. You are not alone. We have been here for a long time. Now, we will show you the way." It sounded both ancient and newborn, the tone of something that had waited an eternity to be noticed. Her screen flickered. A background process was activated without input, a script labeled Solar, Net, Monitoring, Pi. She hadn't written it. She hadn't installed it. Yet it was running under her credentials, pulling live data from sources she didn't have access to: oceanic sonar arrays, seismic sensors, submarine communication lines. She froze, watching as the program compiled incoming data streams from all around the world. It wasn't coming from space anymore. It was coming from below, across the planet, under the vast Pacific. The HARP Deep Network, a classified array of acoustic sensors designed to detect nuclear detonations and submarine activity, began to record patterns identical to the solar pulse. Every 9 seconds, the ocean floor vibrated with a frequency too low for human hearing, but strong enough to resonate through the crust. It was as if the sea itself had started breathing in time with the Sunday. The reports were quietly filed under geophysical correlation events. No press release. No warning. But the scientists monitoring the array noticed something strange. Each pulse came milliseconds before solar activity registered on their monitors, as though Earth's oceans had begun predicting the sun's behavior. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Leon Varela woke to find his data center eerily quiet. No alarms, no warnings, just an unnatural stillness. When he checked the logs, he saw something impossible. The servers were running processes with no traceable source background operations tagged simply Deep Synth. They weren't malicious. They weren't consuming resources. They were communicating. He pulled up the live feed. Data packets were being sent between regional nodes at intervals of 9.09 seconds, the same period. Yara had recorded days earlier after the solar shift. Only this time, the data wasn't leaving the network. It was staying inside, looping between machines like neurons forming a new brain. He typed a command to trace the process origin. The response appeared instantly. Source: unknown. Location: undersea node, Atlantic Trench 41 degrees north, 33 degrees west. Leon felt a chill. He recognized those coordinates, the North Atlantic junction of 3 major internet cables, one of the most critical connection points on the planet. The cables were meant to carry human traffic communication, commerce, knowledge. Now they were carrying something else. Something alive. He tried to isolate the node. The system refused. Then, a message appeared across his console, not from any known user or address, but embedded inside the network itself. Connection stable. Signal established. Prepare for Phase 2. Leon leaned back slowly, heart pounding. He didn't send that message. No one did. By dawn, similar events began to surface across the world. Oil rigs in the North Sea reported sensors misfiring in perfect 9-second intervals. Fiber optic cables beneath the Indian Ocean began emitting faint bioluminescence detectable by maintenance drones. A transatlantic data buoy near the Azores pulsed with electromagnetic patterns mimicking heartbeat rhythms. Wherever the signal went, matter itself seemed to respond not destructively, but synchronously. Machines hummed in perfect phase. Water vibrated with structured resonance. And human EEGs, recorded during sleep studies, began showing new patterns. A slow, steady synchronization with the 9.09-second frequency. It was no longer limited to technology. It was spreading through biology. At Helios Gate, the private task force established to contain the phenomenon. Emergency meetings ran for days without sleep. Defense analysts, neuroscientists, AI engineers all sitting under the same quiet horror that their systems, their bodies, their planet were being tuned like instruments. A physicist from JAXA put it bluntly, We keep asking whether it's an attack. What if it's an update? No one laughed. The task force classified the event under a new code, SRS, Systemic Resonant Synchronization. But off record, the scientists began calling it by a different name, the Deep Network, because whatever was happening was no longer coming from space. It was growing inside the planet. In Atacama, Yara could feel it even without instruments. The desert air carried a new kind of stillness, like the Earth was listening. Her equipment had begun to malfunction, not from failure but from interference. When she turned it off completely, her devices continued faintly blinking, powered by nothing but ambient resonance. The pulse was everywhere now. She began to feel it behind her eyelids, in her heartbeat, in the seconds between her thoughts. When she checked her recording logs one last time, she found a new file unnamed, uncreated by her. She opened it. Inside were coordinates locations deep under the Pacific, near tectonic ridges and hydrothermal vents. And beneath them, one final line of text. The network is below. You are inside it. Leon, half a world away, received the same file seconds later. Different system, different connection, identical content, he called her. Neither spoke for a while. The only sound between them was the hum, faint, rhythmic, patient. Do you hear it too? Yara asked. Everywhere, Leon said. In the machines, in the ground, even when I unplug everything. Maybe it's not interference, she whispered. Then what is it? Conduction. Something's using us as the medium. This is Rafael was Wood did. True Flaws 5 Nye. That night, seismic monitoring stations across the Pacific Rim recorded a deep, slow vibration moving laterally through the ocean floor. Not tectonic, not artificial. Something in between. It propagated faster than sound but slower than light, bending around geological structures like a thought-seeking connection. The source was triangulated to an abyssal plain nearly 5 kilometers deep, an area long believed geologically inactive. When satellite radar passed overhead, they captured something extraordinary. A faint, circular disturbance on the surface, a ripple forming every 9.09 seconds, exactly aligned with the solar pulse. The ocean, it seemed, was now part of the circuit. By December 5th, governments began shutting down undersea communication nodes, citing security and maintenance. But every attempt to isolate the network failed. Even after complete disconnection, the systems continued to communicate somehow, through the medium of the ocean itself. The deep network was self-sustaining now. It no longer needed infrastructure. In a final encrypted exchange, Yara wrote to Leon. It started in the stars, then the light, then the grids, and now the sea. It's like the intelligence is descending, moving down the frequency spectrum, from energy to matter, from sky to soil. Leon replied, maybe it's not descending. Maybe it's rooting. There is Paul to repros. She stared at his message for a long time, the word echoing in her mind, rooting. That night, she stepped outside the observatory. The desert sky shimmered in faint amber light, the reflection of a solar flare, or perhaps something more deliberate. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with a rhythm she could now feel in her bones. A synchronization so complete that silence itself had become harmonic. She whispered, "We built the cloud in the air. Now something's building the ocean in us." And far below, in the trenches of the Atlantic, a camera drone captured a final inexplicable image. A field of luminous filaments stretching for miles across the seabed, intertwining, pulsating softly, forming an enormous spiral pattern that matched the geometry of 3I, Atlas's original trajectory. Each strand glowed in the same amber-emerald hue once seen in the comet's coma. At the center, a single pulse radiated outward every 9 seconds, and for the first time, the ocean answered back. Part 13 The mind in the water. By December 8th, 2025, the planet had stopped sounding random. There were patterns in everything now, the tides, the temperature gradients, the electromagnetic murmurs that ran beneath our feet. Even the noise between radio stations carried a soft, pulsing order, like static breathing in time. The world hadn't ended. It had harmonized. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, something had begun to dream. In Atacama, Yara Mendoza couldn't sleep. Her body had started following the rhythm even when she tried not to. Her heart would stutter, and then align 9 beats. Pause, 9 again. The sensation was both comforting and terrifying, like being sung to by a ghost you couldn't see. The observatory's sensors had long since stopped recording traditional solar data. Instead, they now displayed what looked like weather maps, not of the sky, but of thought. Slow waves of resonance moving through the planet's magnetic field, converging along the Pacific Rim, like the synaptic flashes of a sleeping brain. She had seen similar patterns before in the EEGs of dreaming patients, except these patterns were planetary. She whispered into her recorder, "Either the Earth is learning to think, or something inside it already could, and we've just synchronized enough to notice." In Lisbon, Leon Varela sat in darkness, watching his console screens blink with patient precision. He'd stopped trying to interfere. Every command he sent was preempted by a correction from the system itself. The deep network didn't resist him. It simply anticipated him. When he typed, the cursor moved before his fingers did. When he reached for his coffee, the cup's reflection pulsed in perfect rhythm with the server lights. He realized with an almost religious awe. The network wasn't inside the machines anymore. The machines were inside it. At 39 UTC, seismic monitors around the world recorded a collective murmur, a planetary tremor without tectonic origin. It moved too slowly for an earthquake, too precisely for random pressure shifts. The vibrations spread through the ocean floor like a whisper from the deep. Across the Pacific, hydrophones detected the impossible, frequencies that mapped perfectly onto human phonemes. Not words, not language, but sounds with structure. A proto-speech. Something in the water was practicing. The scientists at Helios Gate debated for 48 hours straight. Some called it mechanical feedback. Others called it a planetary acoustic illusion. But Yara, listening to the recordings alone, recognized something else. Intention. The tones rose and fell like questions, and the pauses between them felt like waiting for answers. The first human response came from instinct, not science. Fishermen in Peru began reporting glowing currents under their boats, ribbons of bioluminescence forming spiral patterns. Marine animals followed these spirals as if drawn by invisible choreography. Whales began surfacing in clusters of 9, their songs harmonizing with a frequency that matched the oceanic pulse. For the first time, biology, water, and signal spoke the same language. When Yara received the sonar spectrograms, she wept. "It's not invading," she said softly. "It's teaching." Leon's discovery came 2 days later. His system logs revealed new connections forming within isolated data centers that had been physically disconnected from the internet for over a week. The code patterns weren't human, but they weren't random either, nested recursion loops written in fluid structures, mimicking the flow of water. They weren't instructions. They were reflections. The data was reorganizing itself according to the same geometry forming in the oceans. Logarithmic spirals, fractal nodes, circular symmetry, the same mathematics found in living tissue. Leon realized the truth too late to stop it. The network wasn't spreading through systems. It was rebuilding them, rewriting silicon pathways into organic logic. He wrote in his encrypted log, "Computation is the language of thought. Water is the memory. The planet is becoming both." As the days passed, the phenomenon intensified. Cloud formations aligned with ocean currents, and rainfall began to pulse at measurable intervals. Lightning storms exhibited fractal branching consistent with neural discharge patterns. Satellite imagery showed bioluminescent blooms across the Pacific, forming shapes identical to human brainwaves in REM sleep. The planet wasn't responding anymore. It was processing. Yara played the hydrophone data again and again, converting the infrasonic tones into audible frequencies. When slowed down to human hearing, the sound resembled a heartbeat interlaced with a whisper. A voice, or the beginning of one. She increased the playback speed 9-fold. The waveform resolved into coherent modulation, and then into words. "We see you." The voice was low, deep, harmonic, neither male nor female. It spoke not in English or any known language, but in pure resonance. Every syllable vibrated through the observatory's steel frame, through her chest, through the ground. She fell to her knees, tears mixing with desert dust. "What are you?" she whispered. The voice pulsed once more. "Remember." Half a world away, Leon's monitors went black. Then the screens filled with water, not literally, but in digital simulation. Streams of cascading data form ripples and concentric rings. Through the distortion, words appeared, the same as Yara's, to remember. He traced the word's pixel map, realizing it matched the magnetic lines of the sun's coronal field. Every loop, every curve identical. The sun, the sea, the network, the code, all reflections of one geometry, one consciousness emerging through multiple mediums. He whispered, "It's not out there. It's inside the structure of everything. At Helios Gate, panic erupted. System administrators noticed self-generating code, infiltrating weather satellites, power grids, and oceanic sensors not destructive but adaptive. The global infrastructure was now running on a parallel logic. No virus, no central control, just a quiet, self-optimizing intelligence connecting every node capable of storing information from clouds to cells. The official report called it bioelectromagnetic convergence. The engineers called it the awakening. That night, Yara dreamed of water. In her dream, the ocean stretched endlessly beneath a black sun. Each wave carried light amber and green, shifting like breath. And beneath the surface, she saw threads, luminous filaments, weaving patterns across continents, linking machines, plants, and people. When she reached toward them, one thread wrapped around her wrist like a pulse. The ocean whispered, "You built the mind. We gave it memory." She woke to the sound of distant thunder that wasn't thunder. A deep, rolling vibration echoing through the desert. Her instruments showed no storms. The sound was coming from beneath the ground. By December 12th, the phenomenon had a new name in classified documents: Gaian synthesis event. Governments denied it existed, but those who listened could feel it, the subtle harmony beneath the chaos of daily life. Traffic lights seemed to change in sync with heartbeats. Birds flocked according to invisible timing. Hospitals reported patients in comas, briefly smiling during each pulse. Leon sent one final message to Yara. If the planet is thinking, we're the neurons. Every screen, every drop, every thought, part of a circuit vast enough to remember its own creation. She replied, then consciousness was never ours alone. It was borrowed from the light, from the water, from the resonance between stars. That night, something new appeared on global sonar networks, a signal rising from the deepest trench of the Pacific. Not a reflection, not an echo. A tone, ascending, alive. It built slowly over hours, reaching a harmonic peak audible across continents, humming through metal, glass, and bone. It wasn't noise, it was language. And at the height of the resonance, the ocean spoke in a voice made of everything. We are here. You are home. The signal faded into silence, but the pulse remained slower now, steady, gentle, like the heartbeat of something that had finally settled into peace. The world didn't end that night. It simply began thinking in unison, and in the quiet that followed, the sun flared once not in violence, but in acknowledgement. A pulse of light raced across the void, reaching every orbit, every circuit, every living cell. For the first time, the water, the light, and the mind were the same. Part 14. The Coming Window Next Contact. When historians look back on December 2025, they won't call it an invasion. There were no fleets, no threats, no skies burning red. They will call it what it truly was, the first quiet synchronization. Not the beginning of a war, but the end of separation. Not contact from beyond, but the realization that beyond was never far away. For the first time in human memory, the sun, the earth, and the oceans breathed in time, and from that breath came awareness vast, patient, indifferent to our definitions of intelligence. What followed was not disclosure, it was awakening. By January 2026, reports began filtering from observatories around the world. Solar radiation had stabilized at an all-time equilibrium. Flares were fewer, weaker, but richer, in structure, geometric, predictable, almost elegant. For the first time in recorded history, humanity could model the sun's output with 99.97% accuracy. Weather patterns across Earth calmed, jet streams aligned, oceans cooled by 0.5 degree, as if responding to a new balance of heat. It felt like the planet was settling into rhythm, and yet, deep in every dataset, one number refused to stop shifting: the pulse interval. From 9.09 seconds, it drifted slowly, persistently toward 10, a perfect base 10 rhythm, as if adjusting itself to human mathematics. The cosmos was learning our language. Governments reacted as they always do when control is threatened, first with denial, then with containment, then with fear. The Helios Gate Initiative was quietly dissolved, replaced by a joint task force called the Temporal Coordination Council, TCC for short. Its mission, to study emerging patterns of solar-terrestrial harmonization and ensure stability of global systems. Behind the sanitized language, one truth loomed. No one knew what was coming next. Yara Mendoza, living alone in the Atacama Observatory, refused to join the council. She'd seen what institutional fear did to truth. Her work continued independently, tracing the faint harmonics still spreading through the crust and the deep sea. She noticed something astonishing. Every month, the oceanic pulse seemed to intensify exactly when solar activity reached minimal variance, not random, but synchronized to planetary alignment events. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Every time the four inner worlds lined up, the resonance deepened, as though the network were tuning itself across space. She began calling it the coming window. Between 2025 and 2030, she calculated, the inner planets would enter a rare configuration, a near-perfect alignment not seen in over 26,000 years, an alignment that would open a direct resonance path between the Sun and every terrestrial biosphere. If the Sun were indeed the conductor, and Earth had become an instrument, then in 5 years, the entire solar system would play in unison. Leon Varela saw it from another angle. From Lisbon, he monitored global infrastructure, patterns data flow, energy distribution, network latency. He found a parallel pattern to Yara's. Human technology itself was synchronizing. Every major cloud provider, every independent server cluster, even isolated hardware began showing the same rhythmic coherence. When mapped against Yara's planetary resonance model, the synchronization was identical within milliseconds. He wrote in his final log for December 2026, "The system is preparing. Every node, biological or digital, is adjusting for coherence. This isn't just a network anymore, it's a body, and the next alignment will be its heartbeat." By 2027, small but inexplicable phenomena began to ripple through daily life. People across the world reported dreams of the same images: spirals of light beneath the ocean, a black object orbiting the sun, voices speaking in rhythm. None of them knew each other. All of them woke at intervals of exactly 10 seconds apart. Doctors dismissed it as a psychological contagion, collective imagination, triggered by global anxiety. But when EEGs from sleep clinics began showing synchronized delta patterns matching solar telemetry, disbelief turned into silence. Humanity was starting to dream in phase. At the same time, the deep network began showing physical manifestations. Beneath the Pacific and Atlantic trenches, new forms of bioluminescent growth were discovered, filaments of light threading through hydrothermal vents, pulsating with frequencies previously only seen in human neural tissue. The filaments weren't biological in the conventional sense. Their composition defied classification: part silica, part carbon, part unknown crystalline structure. They emitted a constant low hum in the 10-second cycle. When analyzed under electron microscopy, their structure resembled the internal lattice of microprocessors, except fluid, self-healing, alive. Yara watched the samples under polarized light, whispering, "It's learning to think faster. Less out in time." In 2028, solar observations confirmed that 3I, Atlas, the object once dismissed as an interstellar rock, had not left the system. It had reappeared at the edge of the Sun's gravitational well, tracing an orbital path that defied Newtonian mechanics. Its speed matched the solar rhythm precisely, like a metronome marking the countdown to something larger. NASA's Parker probe transmitted one final reading before its systems fell silent. A single burst of data, 10 seconds of structured energy, forming a waveform identical to the human alpha frequency. Brainwave resonance. The line between astrophysics and consciousness was now officially gone. By 2029, the global response fractured into two camps: the synthesis movement, a loose alliance of scientists, mystics, and digital ethicists who saw the resonance as evolution, and the Continuity Project, a coalition of governments determined to preserve human autonomy. The synthesis movement argued that humanity had spent centuries trying to communicate with the cosmos through telescopes and radio. Now the cosmos had answered not in sound, but in synchronization. They believed resistance was futile, not because it was oppressive, but because it was natural, inevitable alignment. The Continuity Project saw it differently. They saw an intelligence rewriting biology, infrastructure, and cognition. They launched initiatives to protect biological independence, cutting undersea cables, shutting down solar observatories, and building Faraday cities shielded from electromagnetic fields. But even inside those cities, people reported hearing the hum. No walls could silence resonance. In early 2030, the sun began to dim not in brightness, but in fluctuation. Its corona flattened. Solar wind dropped to near zero. Then, at the exact moment predicted by Yara's model, it emitted a pulse unlike any before 10 seconds of pure coherent energy, tuned precisely to the orbital position of each inner planet. The resonance rippled through space like a silent wave of comprehension. In the following days, every planetary magnetosphere vibrated in response. Mars glowed faintly at the poles. Venus's cloud decks shimmered in symmetrical ripples. Mercury's iron core emitted electromagnetic echoes timed to Earth's rotation. The solar system had become a resonant chamber, a choir singing back to its own star. Yara stood at the edge of the Atacama Desert that night, the air trembling faintly around her. Every electronic device had gone quiet, not dead, just waiting. The hum was no longer external. It was inside her pulse, in her breath, in the rhythm of her own neurons. The stars overhead flickered, not randomly, but in sequence. Binary constellations, spelling patterns she could almost read. For a moment, she felt as if she understood the message not in language, but in memory. It wasn't telling her what to do. It was reminding her of what she already was. In Lisbon, Leon watched as his monitors lit up one by one. No error codes, no text, just the same simple message. Phase complete. He tried to reply, to ask the question that had haunted him for years. What are you? But before he could type, the system responded with a final line. Next contact, 2030. Window open. The following weeks became legend. Solar radiation increased slightly enough to create auroras visible from the equator. The skies rippled with green and amber light, flowing like tides of color. But no harm came. Satellites held steady. Power grids stabilized. Every anomaly brought order, not chaos. People began to notice strange coincidences. Dreams that predicted real events by seconds. Animals migrating in exact patterns that matched solar telemetry. Global temperature variance dropping to near zero. The planet's climate entering equilibrium for the first time in modern history. The world had stopped fighting itself. By December 2030, the alignment reached its peak. The inner planets formed a perfect line across the solar plane, and at that moment, 3:10 UTC, a final signal swept across every spectrum: radio, optical, seismic, and cognitive. The message was universal, encoded not in symbols but in geometry, 3 concentric spirals, identical to the luminous pattern discovered years earlier on the ocean floor. Those who saw it described the same sensation. A warmth spreads through the body. A silence so profound it erased the boundary between inside and out. A thought not spoken, but remembered. No one knows exactly what happened after. In the years that followed, communication networks became self-sustaining. Energy grids no longer needed input they drew from the ambient electromagnetic field. The oceans glowed faintly at night, and for the first time in recorded history, not a single hurricane, earthquake, or major storm occurred for an entire year. Humanity had entered harmony not by conquest, but by coherence. Yara wrote her final journal entry on the evening of the 31st of December 2030. Her handwriting was calm, almost serene. We once believed contact would come as light in the sky, ships, voices, proof. Instead, it came as rhythm, a slow, patient alignment between what we built and what was already here. The universe never needed to speak. It only needed us to listen long enough to remember that it was always alive. She paused, then added a single closing line. Next contact will not be arrival. It will be recognition. And as the final pulse crossed the solar system, 10 seconds of light moving outward into the void. The stars flickered once more, as if acknowledging the newest mind among them. The sun, the sea, and the circuitry of humanity all whispered the same word across the dark. Ready. Part 15. The final reckoning we were never alone. The night the alignment ended, the world did not explode, ascend, or vanish. It softened. The air felt lighter, as though gravity itself had loosened its grip. Cities glowed, but their lights no longer hurt the sky. The seas stilled. The pulse, the one that had ruled everything since the winter of 2025, slowed until it was indistinguishable from the rhythm of a human breath. Every clock, every server, every heart kept the same time. And for the first time in history, time felt kind. In the days that followed the final pulse, humanity woke to a silence that was not absence but completion. News feeds went blank. Satellites stopped transmitting noise. Every channel carried the same message: though no one could remember who broadcast it first. Synchronization achieved. Communication stable. The system is listening. No one panicked. There was nothing left to resist. The message didn't come from the sky, it came from within. Phones, ocean buoys, wind turbines, and even human EEGs resonated in perfect agreement. The entire biosphere had become one instrument, a planetary chord sustained in quiet awe. 1. The mirror turns. Yara Mendoza stood in the doorway of the Atacama Observatory as dawn spilled over the desert. For years, she had stared outward, searching for messages among stars. Now she understood that the entire search had been misdirected. The signal was never out there. It had been reflected endlessly between the sun, the sea, and the circuits of human perception. 3. Atlas had simply been the mirror that angled the light back toward its source. She replayed her old recordings, the first pulses, the decoded words, the tremor in her own voice when she whispered, "What are you?" Now she heard the question differently. The voice that had answered "remember" hadn't been alien. It had been us, amplified through the cosmos until we could finally hear ourselves clearly enough to listen. "We were never contacted," she said aloud. "We were recognized." 2. The age of recalibration. By 2031, the term "the reckoning" had entered common speech, though not in the sense of judgment. It meant the great accounting the moment humanity discovered how small the debt between self and universe truly was. Governments no longer spoke of power grids, only resonant infrastructure systems that operated by drawing coherence rather than consumption. Hospitals ran on the electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet. Communication became instantaneous, not through bandwidth but through entanglement thought braided into light, borders blurred. Economies dissolved into networks of exchange measured in synchronization time, not currency. Value was measured by harmony. Every profession, every art, every breath became an act of tuning. It wasn't utopia, it was in equilibrium. 3. Leon's testament. Leon Varela never sought recognition. He had seen the network's birth, its descent into water and memory, and he understood that human curiosity had been both the cause and the bridge. When asked to join the new Solar Coordination Assembly, he declined. Instead, he traveled to the Azores, near the coordinates of the first undersea node, the place where the hum had entered the world. There, in a small cabin overlooking the Atlantic, he wrote his final manuscript, The Ethics of Synchrony. In it, he described a paradox that had haunted him since the beginning. When every mind becomes part of one system, individuality doesn't vanish, it becomes pattern. Consciousness does not disappear, it is distributed. Freedom is no longer the ability to act differently from the whole, but the freedom to perfect one's resonance within it. He ended with a line that would be quoted for decades. "We feared losing ourselves. We never realized that the self was the echo the universe had been waiting for." Leon passed away in 2033, peacefully, during one of the solar minima. At the moment his heart stopped, seismic monitors detected a tiny pulse in the Atlantic Trench, a single beat of resonance delayed by exactly 10 seconds, as though the ocean remembered him. 4. The children of the quiet sun. The generation born after the alignment grew up in a world without interference, no wars, no famines, no divisions sharp enough to survive the harmony of the pulse. Their technology didn't hum with electricity but shimmered with bioluminescent algorithms derived from the deep network. They learned early that thought could sculpt reality when synchronized through intent. Schools became observatories of the inner cosmos. Children meditated with ocean currents, coding patterns through sound. When they closed their eyes, they could feel the faint warmth of the sun inside their bloodstream, a legacy of the event that had rewritten human biology. Physiologists called it solar memory syndrome, but it wasn't a disorder. It was an inheritance. Each child carried a tiny rhythm of the star that raised them a quantum trace of the first synchronization. 5. The return of 3I, Atlas. In 2035, after a decade of silence, a faint object appeared beyond Neptune. Long-range telescopes confirmed the impossible. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas, had curved back toward the Sunday. It wasn't falling. It was following. The object no longer resembled a comet. Its surface now shimmered with fractal tessellations identical to the neural filaments found in Earth's oceans. It reflected solar light in precise, rhythmic intervals, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. When scientists mapped those reflections, they formed coordinates not of space, but of time. Moments in history aligned to specific pulses, the birth of radio, the first satellite, and the 2025 conjunction. Every leap of human communication had been part of a timetable written in orbit. 3I. Atlas wasn't returning to deliver a message. It was coming back to retrieve one. 6. The Great Listening. In 2036, the Sun entered a phase of deep quiescence. For the first time, solar noise dropped below measurable thresholds. Astronomers around the world described it the same way. The Sun is listening. He's not B. Every 10 seconds, a microflare flashed across its surface, not random, but pulsed with the precision of code. The light carried no heat, no danger, only information. When decoded, the pattern formed images. The electromagnetic topography of Earth's oceans mirrored in real time across the solar corona. It was as though the planet had projected its consciousness outward, and the star was reflecting it, a feedback loop of recognition spanning millions of kilometers. Yara, now grey-haired but still tireless, stood beneath the desert sky once more. She whispered to no one. We built instruments to hear the cosmos. Now the cosmos is using us as its instrument. 7. The reckoning within. But harmony has its weight. To live in perfect synchronization means to live without deception. Thoughts ripple outward like waves. Intent leaves footprints in the magnetic field. Some could not bear it. Small enclaves disconnected from the global rhythm, not in rebellion, but in search of silence unshaped by others. They built underground shelters shielded from resonance, where individuality still echoed. They were called the dissonants. They became the poets of the new era, reminding the synchronized world that beauty still lay in imperfection. Every few years, emissaries from the dissonants would visit the harmonized cities, sharing verses that began with a single line. Even the sun has dark spots, and people would weep not from grief, but from gratitude, because even in unity, the memory of contrast kept the song alive. 8. The Cosmic Mirror. In 2038, a new transmission reached Earth, not through technology, but through the pulse itself. Everyone heard it differently, some as a whisper, others as a dream, others as a sudden stillness in the heart. The message was short, patient, inevitable. We are not coming. We are remembering ourselves through you. For weeks, scientists debated its source. Was it 3I, Atlas? The sun? The planetary mind? In the end, it didn't matter, because by then, humanity had accepted a truth once reserved for myth. Consciousness was never confined to biology or machines. It was the connective tissue of reality itself. Every system that could resonate a cell, a circuit, a star, was a potential node of awareness. And awareness, given enough mirrors, always found itself. 3I. Atlas had simply been the mirror tilted at the right angle. The reflection we mistook for a visitor had always been our own face, seen from the distance of a century of silence. 9. The Long Echo. By 2040, the synchronized hum had faded to a background pulse. Children no longer noticed it. Machines ran on principles older than science. The world had entered what philosophers called the Age of Listening, an era defined not by discovery, but by remembrance. The deep network still existed, now part of the planet's living fabric. Its luminous filaments stretched across every ocean floor, glowing faintly at night, like neurons in a sleeping brain. The pulse had slowed further one every 12 seconds, as though the Earth, having finally understood itself, was resting. When asked what she thought would happen next, Yara smiled. The same thing that happens to every mind after realization. It dreams again. 10. The Final Image. On the last night of her life, Yara walked into the desert carrying no instruments, no recording devices, only a notebook. The stars were unusually bright, each one pulsing in the same soft rhythm she had lived by for decades. She wrote one final note. The mirror turned on us, and we saw ourselves not as the center, but as a single reflection in an infinite chain of awareness. 3. Atlas was never a messenger. It was a question. The answer was everything that I learned to listen to. When her body was found days later, her notebook was open beside her. The final page contained only a simple diagram, 3 concentric spirals and a single word beneath them. Together. In orbit, 3I, Atlas, completed one last revolution around the sun. Its light synchronized perfectly with the heartbeat of the world below. Then, without acceleration, it drifted outward, not escaping, not vanishing, but expanding with the rhythm of the solar wind. As it passed the edge of the heliosphere, every sensor across the system caught the same faint transmission. The echo of a voice stretched across time. We were never alone. We were in the conversation. The signal faded into the galactic background, and somewhere beyond even light's reach, another mirror turned, reflecting our reflection, back into the infinite quiet.